Hello, I'm the Homestar Runner. Today on Pegwarmers, we're talking about action figures with rubber bands inside them. Hooray, get excited! Welcome to Pegwarmers, I'm Kevin, and I'm here to talk about toys. This week's episode, we're going back to the O-Ring figures. We're talking about the Super 7 ReAction Plus figures. Last week, if you missed it, I talked about the Hasbro O-Ring figures that were included in the G.I. Joe Transformers crossover set. We looked at Cup and Leatherneck and Sergeant Slaughter. Time to find out whether the Super 7 figures hold up, underperform, or outdo Hasbro's newer G.I. Joe releases. I picked up the entire first wave. That includes helmeted Cobra Commander that pretty much looks like the cartoon version, a blue battle android trooper, which is based on his comic book appearance, a blonde Covergirl, which is based on her cartoon premiere, and a Snake Eyes that just seems like they threw some stuff together and decided to see what would stick to make an all-new kind of version 2 version. Oh, blue laser. I've got Cobra Commander here. I like that the file cards are traditional file cards. I'm not comparing this to the original one, but they seem pretty standard, right? File name classified, primary military, specialty intelligence, secondary military, specialty ordnance, experimental weaponry, birthplace classified, grade commander-in-chief. Cobra Commander is hatred and evil personified, corrupt, a man without scruples, probably the most dangerous man alive. Alright, I just got Cobra Commander out of the package, and my first thought is his O-ring is too tight. His chest clicks into place, sort of, when he's perfectly upright, and if you move it out of that, he wants to tilt back. This seems like a problem we dealt with in the late 90s with G.I. Joes, when they kind of did those reissues. That's not the best thing to have happening here for Super 7. These figures also feel very brittle, almost. The Hasbro ones almost feel rubbery. These ones almost feel brittle, but the joints are very smooth motion. I don't feel like I'm going to break anything moving the joints for sure, but just the feeling of the plastic. I'm not saying that the plastic is brittle. It just feels very hard, very dense, which is kind of unusual. I do like the detailing on Cobra Commander here. It looks pretty much like his version 1 action figure, but the helmet has some more cartoon-accurate detailing in the shape of the helmet and the shape of the face mask, as well as that gray stripe on top. I'm very excited to have this figure. I did notice that he has a swivel head. I assumed for some reason that some of these guys would have swivel heads and some of them would have ball joints, just like the vintage G.I. Joe. And then when I started thinking about that, I was like, oh, that hurts their ability to part swap, which hurts their ability to make cheap figures when they want to do part swaps and things like that, unless they're only doing the part swaps that the original series had done. And that doesn't always make sense. But if all of these guys have swivel heads, that's a little disappointing. Now, these are not marketed as exactly the G.I. Joe O-Ring figures from Hasbro. They are definitely marketed as ReAction Plus, and ReAction figures have swivel heads. These guys do have a lot of extra joints compared to ReAction figures. So that's one kind of interesting thing. I wonder if that will stick around for the whole line. I wonder if they'll start doing swivel heads eventually, because fans will kind of ask for that. And maybe it's one little cut corner thing they can do and get away with it that works in their benefit and won't bother people too much. I don't know. I'm interested in seeing. Cobra Commander does not have the charging port on his back for the gun. And I'm okay with that, because that's really a version 1 action figure thing and not a cartoon thing. He's got very slender legs. His ankles are very thin. His arms are also pretty thin, but again, that's fairly cartoon accurate. And he comes with 2 blasters. One is very minimal detail. It doesn't really look like his hairdryer gun. I don't really know if it's supposed to be a specific gun or not. And the second pistol he comes with is very much the cartoon pistol that a lot of characters used. But if you think back to G.I. Joe the movie, when he's got the cape on and he's like leading, all the guys around trying to find Pythona. This is the gun that he holds in that scene, and many other scenes. But I've always liked the look of that cartoon gun. I'm pretty happy with this. The O-ring, sort of the pelvis pop thing, is the one thing that kind of annoys me about him. I'm wondering if that'll happen with the other characters from this wave also. But overall, I think he's pretty cool. I also don't think you could fit a head in that helmet. It doesn't stick out enough in the front. It's maybe just too small. It's kind of Pinhead-like. But overall, I like the figure. I like that they went with this look. They're not just trying to recreate the original figure, even though a lot of the parts do pretty much recreate the original figure. It does also give us a more cartoon look. Now, his hands don't seem anywhere near as rubbery as the Hasbro figures, but both weapons do fit in his hands pretty easily. I wasn't really worried about breaking the thumbs, but again, because this is a little bit harder plastic, will those hands hold up? Hard to say this early in the line. I did want to grab the original figures so I could kind of look at them a little bit. Like I said, the helmet is very different. The helmet's very different. He does have the light blue shirt on under his jacket instead of the black, like the original toy. He's got the longer gloves, no red stripe on his leg. He has some gray details on his belt instead of black. And, of course, the colors are that darker color that Cobra Commander was as opposed to the baby blue. I'm not a huge fan of the baby blue. I like the medium blue that Cobra Commander was in the cartoon. Maybe it's a Maybelline. Next up, let's jump over to Covergirl. I almost skipped buying her. I don't really think I need characters just with different hair. It doesn't really excite me that much. I do like that the outfit's a little bit different color than her original figure, but like I said, I don't really just need a blonde Covergirl for no reason. But I kind of just decided I wanted to get this whole wave and really look over all the offerings from it. Covergirl, Wolverine Driver, file name, Courtney Krieger, military specialty armor, secondary military specialty, AFV mechanic, birthplace Peoria, Illinois, grade E4 specialist. The day I went to shoot the G.I. Joe Transformers crossover episode was the day these guys arrived. And then the day these guys arrived, the Super 7 Ultimate Wave, including Covergirl, arrived. So I don't know for sure what next week holds, but you may be getting more G.I. Joe. So here I've got Covergirl out of the package. Her arms are very slender. Cobra Commander's arms are pretty slender. I had a conversation with a buddy of mine, and we thought that the hands on this figure looked kind of manly and very plain. And they are a little large, and her arms are a little plain. But they are very thin, which at least looks good. She's got long hair with that swivel joint, but she really can barely turn her head because the hair hits the shoulders. I'm not super complaining there because I do like the look of the longer hair. You know, this is the kind of same head sculpt, similar head sculpt I would imagine for the Baroness. But she does have the jacket on with the shirt underneath, the collar sticking out. She's got very skinny legs, but she's got the little calculator on her side there, her hip. She's got the little details on her boots with the squares. I like them a lot. And she comes with the classic cartoon rifle, which is the snow job gun, this time in brown. She looks pretty good. If there's one thing I would complain, I think her face is too bland. This girl is a supermodel. She looks like a ReAction figure, very low detail on the face, which is kind of disappointing. But it's probably the same head that was on the ReAction Covergirl figure. They probably just ported it over here. I don't even know if they retooled it or not. It might be a new sculpt, because I don't know how the ReAction figure heads attach to their bodies. May also be the reason why we're sticking with swivel heads on this line, so we can reuse a lot of those face sculpts. And the face sculpts were good for a lot of the characters. But this one's just kind of bland. I do like the green outfit overall. It looks pretty good. But of course, I've got the original Covergirl. It's kind of funny because I store my vintage Covergirl with a weapons pack version of the cartoon gun because I like all my characters to have a weapon. And so a lot of the characters that were drivers and things like that don't have any weapons. I tend to arm them with those. We had the Auburn bob cut on the original Covergirl. Dark brown jacket, light tan pants, unpainted straps. So that is the one maybe plus here, is that the new one has painted in straps. She does lose her insignia on her armband, which probably wasn't in the cartoon. And she's a little bit more flat-chested, which again, like I said, she's supposed to be a model. The head sculpt may be an improvement. I never thought the original Covergirl was all that super attractive in the face, but I think a lot of those early face sculpts, the Baroness I thought was always the one I always thought they did the best job on with those first couple. Scarlet and Covergirl weren't fantastic. But here they are side by side. I think the original Covergirl has a more slender waist as well, giving her a little bit more of a feminine figure. But the detailings are similar between the two figures. Paint scheme's different and the haircut's different. Covergirl's O-ring, it still feels really tight, but it's not doing that pop thing that Cobra Commander was. B.A.T. Bats. Boy, it sounds like there's marbles in my mouth when I try to say Battle Android Trooper. Next up is the Cobra Bat. One of everyone's favorite army builders. I did resist army building. I probably should have gotten a second one, because I do like to have at least two of everybody. I like army building, but I've definitely cut back on it. And, you know, I liked, with 3 3/4, I feel like you can army build. Larger scale, it's really hard to have more than like 2 or 3 of any one character. But you can have a big army of 3 3/4 inch figures. They don't take up a ton of space. So I may pick up another one of these bats, or I might just wait and hope for another release in a more traditional paint scheme, perhaps. Battle Android Troopers. File name, classified. Military specialty, classified. Secondary military specialty, classified. Why don't they just put down robot? Anyway, like I said, I think the file card is pretty much like the vintage one, but I'm not actually comparing them. Alright, we've got the bat out of the package. He does have a swivel head, and that kind of sucks. It's not the end of the world, but it's not really what I wanted. And I'm going to start with a little bit of a complaint here. It's kind of fun that they did him in blue, so he looks like the comic. But this is actually totally inaccurate. So, in cartoons, we call it cell shading, right? When they have, like, multiple colors to give highlights and shadows. In miniature painting, we call it edge highlighting, where you paint with a lighter tone to kind of make things pop. In comic books, they ink things, and then they go back and they put the colors in. And in old comics, you only had a limited palette, so they often used blue as a highlight for black. And you can argue whether a character is Batman dressed in blue or is Batman dressed in black. Is the Cobra Bat actually dressed in blue in the comic book? No. He's like Colossus's hair or Superman's hair. He's black with blue highlight as the highlight, because they don't have a lot of options for colors for the highlight. And the toy maker knows this. Super 7 is not dumb. They don't understand. It's not like they don't understand how comic books work. Toy Biz did this in the 90s with Colossus and left probably a generation of people thinking Colossus had blue hair. And we're trying to tell everybody there's blue bats. This is not accurate, but it's still kind of fun. And it gives them a way to sell this bat figure twice, because you know they're going to put it out in more traditional colors. His yellow is a little bit more tan. The plate on his chest looks pretty good. Lots of details there, lots of paint deco. I like the head sculpt. It's a little different than the vintage one. But again, we're matching artwork here. The arms are very techno. His hips don't splay out to the side very well. Well, maybe they do. Actually, they do. They're just very stiff. I'm just sort of trying to check out how the range of motion is on these figures compared to those vintage ones. They do actually move pretty well. I didn't think they were going to go out to the side at first. You know, it'll, again, like the thumbs, it'll be interesting to see if the waist pieces break on these guys over time. The gap between their legs is very small. So, I haven't tried taking one of these guys apart yet. But that could be interesting. His little techno bit on the side of his leg and his pistol are very small and very flat. It doesn't seem like the sculptors are going very big over the buck on these guys. They're keeping them very slender. It'll be interesting to see if they do some of the later characters, if they do somebody like Road Pig, or they do, just some of the 90s characters, if they'll go a little bulkier, because the line did head that way eventually. I do like that this guy has wrist articulation in both arms, and that's because both hands are removable to allow you to put on accessories, and that's pretty fun that they incorporated that. He also has his backpack on straight out of the package, and the empty space here is big enough that you can actually put his hand inside there if you want to put accessories on his arms. You can definitely fit everything in storage very easily here. For his accessories, he has the old claw hand, a little bit simplified, and these things tend to, I guess it's the ReAction style to it, tend to be a little bit more simplified. He's got what's supposed to be a flamethrower, but as a kid I always thought was a machine gun. Again, simplified down a little bit. He's got the little laser weapon. He also comes with a machine gun. This is also a reference to a B.A.T comic book appearance. I've heard a lot of people complaining that he can't hold it well. It went right in his hand for me, and it's in there pretty snugly. The hand holds it fine. The little stock fits on the inside there. I don't know if people just didn't position it right, or I just got lucky. Yeah, I got no problem getting him to hold the gun. I'm not sure. I'm a sucker for Cobra Bats. I've always liked them. I'll buy him in black. I'll buy him if they want to paint him up in the version 2 colors with the neon green and the orange. I don't know if I want Arctic bats or camo bats. I don't need Inferno bats. You know, so a couple repaints they might get me on. I would probably buy Python Patrol bats if they did them. I know they did them for the ReAction line. I might take an O-ring, a ReAction Plus version of the Python Patrol bats. I guess I should explain Homestar Runner real quick. Homestar Runner is a Flash animation cartoon character. His catalog is preserved on YouTube, but it's not the same as when it was a Flash animation thing. I was a huge fan in college. I have a bunch of the PVC figures they released. They had a spoof G.I. Joe toy line embedded in the continuity called Cheat Commandos. And the bad guy was the Blue Laser, which is funny because Red Laser is a bad guy in Action Force. Each one of the characters had a silly accessory, and, you know, the parodies are awesome if you've never seen them. And I recently kind of I fell down a rabbit hole again of Homestar Runner stuff. I watched a few, like, commentary videos about what the Brothers Chap did with the animation, and I saw that they were selling a puppet, and just decided to, you know, throw them some shekels, support the brand. Fluffy Puff Marshmallows on the tag. Fluffy Puff Marshmallows. I used to do a Homestar Runner impression as a young adult, and I'm very rusty at it now. But I had to pick it up, and since it arrived the same day as the O-ring figures, he made a little appearance in this episode. Let me know if you enjoyed it. Maybe he'll make a comeback, but probably not. I was also at Five Below today with my stepsons and my wife, and they were picking out some stuff. And I had seen these before, the Retro Toys boxes by Funko. I actually picked up the Leatherneck figure recently. I showed him off in a video. I found him at a yard sale or flea market or something like that for $1, I think. And I saw these. I saw there's a Leatherneck, a Cobra Commander, a Snake Eyes, and a Shipwreck. The Snake Eyes one's not super interesting. But I wouldn't mind Cobra Commander or Shipwreck. The My Pet Monster one's pretty cool, too. Anyway, we were at Five Below today, and this box was open on the shelf. And I just decided to be nosy since somebody had ripped it open. And I peeked inside, and it was Cobra Commander. So I figured it was probably going to sit there for a while. I don't know how many kids are really looking for Cobra Commander figures. But since it was open and I was guaranteed that my $5 was getting me a G.I. Joe figure, I decided to grab him. He's a ninja. Alright, the last figure from this wave is Snake Eyes. One of the coolest G.I. Joes. They opted to go for sort of an interesting take here. It's not the purplish gray color from the cartoon. It's not the pretty much all black figure from the original toy line. This one has dark gray bodysuit, medium gray straps and stuff, but blue boots and some other blue highlights on him. It's sort of unusual, and I'm wondering if they're just going to, like, repaint this a couple times and sell it to us multiple times with, you know, maybe the more accurate cartoon colors, and then also one that's maybe more dark. The bright blue boots are a little silly, in my opinion. We'll take a look at them and see how it goes, but this is basically the version 2 Snake Eyes, the one that would have come with the wolf that has the visor and everything. Snake Eyes, Commando. File name, classified. Primary military specialty, infantry. Secondary military specialty, hand-to-hand combat instructor. Birthplace, classified. Grade, E5. The man is a total mystery, but he's really good at his job. Heck, he's the best. Alright, we've got Snake Eyes out of the package here. I like his head sculpt, other than the fact that it's a swivel head. His torso seems okay. I wouldn't have minded maybe a little bit more musculature there, but it's okay. His arms look so skinny, though. My goodness, these are the arms of a 1982 G.I. Joe. They gotta make these guys a little bit beefier. They are kind of like superheroes, you know? His legs are also very skinny. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not in love. I'm not in love with this Snake Eyes. And I kind of knew that I wasn't going to be in love. I could kind of tell from the render that he wasn't fantastic. He's not terrible, but he's not fantastic. It's like his detailing on his belt looks okay. The grenades are real flat. His holster and knife sheath are very small and very, like, just soft detail. Like, the knife is so... looks like a Lego knife. It just doesn't have any of that, like, I don't know, crispness that a G.I. Joe thing would have. He does come with a backpack, which 2 out of the 4 figures in this wave came with a backpack. It is super plain looking. It's just sort of a blue knapsack. It's got one little flap sculpted in here. It does have a little slot there, so I believe we can put his sword into it, which that's a nice feature to have. For his other additional accessories, again, having a little trouble with his hips. His holster and his knife are very high up on his legs, making it hard to splay his legs out wide because they immediately hit his waist. So that might be a thing that they would want to sculpt just a hair lower. But then again, his arms couldn't really reach them. So maybe they did sculpt them in the right place, or the best that they could do for these figures. I wonder how closely these waists are to the vintage figures. Maybe they had a little bit narrower top arches there. I don't even know how to describe it. That allowed those legs to move a little bit more. His other accessories, besides the backpack, a sword, again, very plain. Looks like a Playmobil accessory, and it fits very floppily in his hand. It doesn't fall out, but it flops around. And then he has a Uzi-type submachine gun. Again, kind of dull looking, kind of oversized. I am not in love with this Snake Eyes. He's not terrible, but I'm not in love with him. Took the sword in and out of his hand there. I'm not sure how this... Okay. The knife slides out the bottom. There's not really a slot for it at the bottom. You just have to have the backpack pulled away from his body enough that it'll fit in there. No wolf is a little bit disappointing. Version 2 Snake Eyes. The wolf is part of what made him cool. Again, I don't dislike the figure completely, but the paint color choices for some of it is a little funny, and then the accessories are kind of lame. If you've always been a fan of version 2 Snake Eyes and you're not interested in shelling out the money for a vintage one, I guess this will do as a substitute. I know this Super 7 line is called ReAction Plus, but somehow I was expecting them to be closer to Hasbro's G.I. Joe figures. They just aren't. This Sergeant Slaughter figure from Hasbro that came with the Triple T is fairly passable for a vintage figure. I actually think maybe it has just a little bit too much detail with like the rim of the glasses. But like the level of wrinkles in the legs, the musculature, it feels like a G.I. Joe. These new Super 7 O-ring figures just feel too skinny. They just feel like the details are all too soft, and their accessories are all goofy and oversized. Not everything's perfect with the Hasbro ones either. You know, they cheaped out and made Leatherneck's 2 accessories the same color. They did put paint on Sarge's swagger stick, but I guess the original had that too. You know, I don't mind accessories being only one color. Paint is great, but they don't have to have it. But these accessories just aren't that cool looking. They're just a little too goofy, out of scale for some of these guys. Some of them are better than others. Like I said, they don't even match themselves in style. The Cobra Commander are way more geometric shape based than Snake Eyes' gun, even though Snake Eyes' gun still doesn't really have much detail to it. The gun that comes with the bat is still a little bit basic on detail, but feels like it has a little bit more to it going on proportion-wise and things like that. It's got an actual, like, sculpted out sight instead of just, like, bumps on the top. I certainly don't hate these, but I'm also certainly not in love. I think Cobra Commander is the one to get if you're only going to get one, because he kind of is the ultimate mind's eye view of Cobra Commander. Like, when I think of Cobra Commander, I think of the cartoon Cobra Commander. This Snake Eyes isn't really any version of Snake Eyes, truly, that I think of. The Bat, as a comic book-ish version, without any black wash or cell shading type highlighting to make it actually look like a comic book version, isn't really the Bat I'm looking for. And Blonde Covergirl is just not really a variation that I was ever dying to have. I don't mind that the outfit's a little different. If we don't want to, recreate every figure and we want to do something different, that's cool. I really hope that we see ball joints at the necks. I'm hoping we see a little bit more detail in the figures and their accessories. And I hope we see them kind of push the envelope a little bit, go out in some other directions. I know they designed their own gunners for the mothership that failed. I'd like to see them do some more interesting things. And maybe I'm my own... Maybe I'm sort of contradicting myself, because I was like, oh, they should do their own thing a little bit, but then I'm like, oh, this version of Snake Eyes doesn't look like anything that I'm interested in. I'm just saying, like, do some unusual things from the toy line. You're going to have to do Duke, you're going to have to do Scarlet, you got to do all the key players anyway, but if you can slide somebody into the waves that are more interesting than, say, just Blonde Covergirl, that could be cool. I kind of mentioned that with, like, the Snake Cobra Commander. There was once a man Cobra Commander. I really liked that they did the winter coat versions of guys like Bazooka from G.I. Joe the movie, or some of the episodes of the cartoon. I think those would be fun. Maybe they do that as a multi-pack or something like that, instead of taking up slots in waves or something. I don't know. I'm sure they have a plan. I know they wanted to try and do these before, and they couldn't, and maybe Hasbro's making them stick to their sort of ReAction style a little bit more, because Hasbro's still doing some O-ring things. It's hard to know what is allowed and not allowed, but I would love to see them improve just a little bit more. It'll be cool to see where these go. Like I said, the classified Wave 1 figures, I bought them to support the line. They weren't really my favorite, but Classifieds has really moved in a good way. And improved on itself. And maybe these will too. We'll have to see where it goes. I'm sure they will start doing pre-orders for a future wave before long, because Super 7 is always asking for your money for product to be delivered later. It was nice that these actually weren't really that kind of a case. They were, the pre-order was pretty quickly delivered. So that was definitely nice. In the comments down below, let me know what you think of the ReAction Plus figures. Are you buying any of them? Are you avoiding them? I'm an O-ring guy. I just really love O-ring G.I. Joes, and I want to see where this goes, and if they're going to do some, really fun stuff with it. If I buy the first few waves and they're all kind of like this, then we'll see. Maybe I'll cherry pick this line. But for now, I want to try to get every figure probably from the second wave and see where they go. The other big thing is that toy lines often take a couple of waves to change, because they're probably already working on Wave 2 before they get any feedback on Wave 1. So that also happens, and so sometimes lines kind of find their home later. I like ReAction figures for goofy movies and things like that didn't get figures. The Goonies. Even, some of, like, the Terminator stuff is kind of cool to try and make toys, that are more from that era. Like, the Aliens figures are fantastic. But when you take He-Man and you take Ninja Turtles and you take G.I. Joe, for the most part, I don't really care for them as ReAction figures, because they lose something that's part of their integral aesthetic. So I'm excited to see where it goes. Do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't done so, share this video with a toy collecting friend. If you want to support the channel further, you can join us on Patreon for bonus videos. There's a Discord chat for the second tier. I love the group of collectors we have on there and would love to see that grow. Thanks for hanging on the peg with me.